welcome to TheAIbumMan, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Hand Cannot Erase by Steven Wilson. So as never has an album for me been more requested by my subscribers than Steven Wilson's latest album. And perhaps the reason for this lies with, well, the overwhelming critical acclaim. Every prog fan, rock fan, whether Porcupine Tree fan or not, Steven Wilson solo fan or not, really has been getting off of their rocker to declare this a concept album worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as Pink Floyd's The Wall, The Who's Tommy, and Radiohead's OK Computer. And the reason I particularly picked those albums to refer to was because of the themes that Steven Wilson explores on this album. The character in which the story develops is definitely a tale that sort of explores themes of solitude. The character's sort of almost solipsistic, and Steven Wilson takes on a female voice in his examination of introspection and the human psyche, sort of loosely based on the real-life story of a woman called Joyce Vincent, whose corpse lay undiscovered in her London apartment for 3 years. Yeah, undiscovered for 3 years. That is absolutely mental. And it talks about disappearing and becoming lost and sort of enveloped in a city, and it's a very interesting story. And as a result of that, this review is going to take the form, as well as just discussing my opinions on the albums and the tracks on the album, as a lyrical analysis, track by track. I'm going to be looking exactly what the story is he's telling, and some things with the character, because I found the story really engrossing and interesting in this album. And I feel many reviewers have, they've touched on the story, but I don't think anyone's really gone into depth about exactly what Steven Wilson is conveying with this album, and the themes, the motifs, and just the character herself. So that's what we're going to be going into, as well as general musical and just opinions on the album. So we'll start at the start. It's a very good place to start, and that is First Regret. There's not much to say about this. Is really just a 2-minute ambient track consisting of sounds and a piano melody, which will later be a sort of a musical motif. But really this track just serves as a segue into 3 years older. And musically, from the opening organ sounds to the bright guitar-driven stutter of a prog rock sound, I suppose, it establishes a song that doesn't feel too similar to The Raven, but is to The Raven Who Refused to Sing, which was his previous solo album, but definitely continues in some respects that sound, certainly far more than I would say most tracks on this album. It definitely does have that love of 70s prog, I'd say, sort of imbued within its sound. This really is a tremendously performed opener that musically establishes the more sort of melancholy moments that this album contains throughout. And just before Wilson takes the mic, we hear sort of Floyd-like guitar cascade upon the acoustic-driven sound as Wilson's soulful voice comes across, feeling ever so fragile and expressing definitely themes of nostalgia, loss of love. And really, lyrically, this song is just a background and a summary of the character's life, really sort of up to the point she's at. From expressing a fondness towards the only man she ever loved, but yet not necessarily any regret necessarily in their parting ways. And I also can't help but find the title and reference to 3 years older as sort of expressing the feelings of lost connection and regret at losing contact with his sister. Both of these stories we'll go into later when Steven Wilson elaborates upon them further. But generally, we see how she is isolated, this gloomy figure, presumably living in London like her counterpart Joyce. And she uses the internet to reach out and make these sort of meaningless connections to the outside world, and kind of ultimately wonders why she just bothers to stay where she is. And these themes, they'll definitely be explored later in detail. But for now, the music in this track, it really helps across the 10 minutes of this epic to expand upon the cacophony of emotions that the character feels, from the wistful acoustic beauty to the mad, heavy, all over the place prog metal. 3 years old is a tremendous tremendous opening track. The title track, Hand Cannot Erase, comes next, and it really is not quite what you would expect. It's a far more pop rock orientated song, and definitely reminiscent of that sort of earlier Porcupine Tree sound. I mean, it's a hook that would have fit on an album like, say, Lightbulb Sun, certainly. You know, you have songs on that like Four Chords That Made a Million, and the type of hook here, it's not too dissimilar to that vein. And this song feels upbeat, optimistic, and really kind of hopeful, with catchy guitar parts, and infectious chorus, and lovely piano and electronic drum beats, just building to these satisfying pop rock conclusions. Lyrically, the character tries so hard, I feel here, to really fit into society, to attempt to make these normal human connections. And she does succeed at one point. In her second year of college, she falls in love, well, as close to romantic love as she can possibly get. And for all the good times she shared during this relationship, she just felt that she was playing a role in a dream of a life, that she was just sacrificing her real self. And in the accompanying blog, it says that whenever we were together, I was counting the seconds until I could be on my own again, and I knew that couldn't be a good thing. Sometimes I couldn't hide the fact, and I hurt him deeply, so in the end I got what I wanted, and I was alone again. The accompanying blog, by the way, Stephen Wilson wrote a blog of the character which chronicles a number of years in her life, and just some of the emotions and thoughts she felt, which are expressed on the album. And really, the love here may not have been erased, but it just simply wasn't viable. Her peculiarities, her eccentricities overwhelmed and smothered her. I think Perfect Life was definitely a shock for a lot of Stephen Wilson fans when they first heard it, and certainly was for me when I first heard it as a single. It sounded far more like Boards of Canada than a Stephen Wilson song. It's definitely something that I find works far better in the context of the album than it did just by itself as a single. It was not a choice as a single. Hand Cannot Erase should definitely have been the single. And we have a female voice here played by Katherine Jenkins, and the character speaks about the time she had with her sister, in which I'll elaborate upon in a second. The track is quite haunting. The electronic beat, which really dominates and drives this song, just has this sense of immediacy to it, particularly during the spoken word part, and instruments begin to be added as Stephen Wilson comes in after Katherine Jenkins' sort of spoken, sung part, but more sort of spoken, I would say. As he sings the refrain, "We got a perfect life," again and again, building gradually, showing sort of this true joy, true love in the character's life. The only time perhaps she could ever be described as truly happy. Basically what happens is that when she was younger, a sister arrived whom her parents fostered, and the character and the sister, they bonded very closely for the 6 months that she was there, listening to mixtapes, watching the barges. But after parents divorced, the two kids became separated. And really the most emotionally devastating part is the lyric, "Until I could no longer remember her face, her voice, even her name." In fact, the character ends up just forgetting even the most basic features of her sister, which seems difficult, but it was only a short time she was with her and just one connection, and many years later it really seems to have faded for her. But yet there's still this optimism balanced geniusly with the devastating moment in this character's life. And it's a song that overall has grown on me immensely since my first listen. Routine was a track that I could not for the life of me during my first few listens understand where it stood in the story. The lyrics didn't seem to make sense because they referenced a lot of stuff that isn't to do with the character's life. And it certainly makes far more sense if you have the deluxe edition, which I unfortunately don't. I certainly couldn't afford the deluxe edition, but after seeing the accompanying video to this song, when I saw Stephen Wilson perform most of this album in its entirety, well basically in its entirety live a couple weeks ago, and also reading just on the internet from those who do own the deluxe edition what it's about, I can explain what is going on here. Basically, the character reads an article about a woman whose family died, and this woman established simply a routine to pass the time, to make her life feel meaningful and manageable when she just had absolutely nothing else. And this sense of isolation and sadness emanating from this clearly has a profound impact upon the character in order to dedicate an entire song to it. But does this concept work overall as a song? Fuck, yes, it does. The piano at first takes hold of Wilson, setting up this regime of the woman in the article, before we hear the truly resplendent voice of Ninette Tayeb, who adds that crucial female voice to the album, and definitely adds that just depth to the texture and the impact, particularly to the emotional impact that I personally find in this song. In fact, this song goes as vocally diverse as to include a choir boy who, weirdly enough, is Leo Blair. Yes, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair's son, which I can't say I expected him to appear, but damn, does that kid have an angelic choir boy voice, like his father or not. You can't deny that this kid can freaking sing. And it's definitely a very unexpected turn, of course, in the vocal department, but I do think it serves the story of the song well. And quite simply, this contains one of the most stunning moments, I would argue, of Steven Wilson's career, the kind of mostly autumn-like crescendo when Ninette proves herself to truly be an unbelievable vocalist, belting out a passionate vocal performance that I just can't help but compare, particularly with some of the screams at the end to, it reminds me of Claire Torres and Pink Floyd's A Great Gig in the Sky a little bit. I mean, we're talking that level of ethereal transcendence as she pours on each of your heartstrings one by one, shivers rippling down your spine, you just become fully immersed in the sound and the story that Steven Wilson has constructed. Though for all the beauty contained in this album, you're always going to get that guy who's like, when a porcupine tree gonna reform? I want porcupine tree. And you know what, Steven Wilson even thought of this possibly in this album, because damn, do we have some metal here instead of just odes to 70s prog. If you like your metal from your porcupine tree, then you're going to be jumping for joy when you hear Home Invasion. Now, not to say this is an all-out metal riff and headbanger, no, but you're certainly going to be headbanging to parts of this, and honestly, musically and lyrically, this could have slotted into Fiat for Blank Planet quite nicely, and is there really a higher compliment I could pay to this song than this? I mean, Fiat for Blank Planet is Steven Wilson's best album, well, possibly up to this point. And certainly the lyrics, as I said, lyrics like download sex and download God, they're the lyrics that open the track after some good old riffing has taken place. And definitely his wariness of technology and its impacts on modern society, which of course Fear of a Blank Planet had, definitely shared by this song, the potential dangers of the internet age, just how it's all too easy to live your entire life, every emotion, everything that constitutes humanity, just by really using Google and social media. You can, well, as it says in the song, download the life you wish you had. And I sort of can't help but draw some comparisons to the fantastic book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, in which people are totally consumed by four-war TVs and seashells in their ears, and I don't really think Steven Wilson's going for that type of vibe here of just, the internet's a good thing, it's cool, but just don't let it completely consume you and define who you are. And musically, well, as I said, this is a heavier track. It's certainly not all-out metal. In fact, I would actually argue my favourite instrument on the rest of the track is the mellotron. I always love the mellotron. It's played by Mr. Wilson. This song overall, it feels fantastically progressive metal. Jagged guitar edges, spiking the music, but also some classic 70s prog elements, as I said, of the mellotron. It takes the old and the new, blends them together into a very compelling and thematically well done modern prog metal masterclass. I don't have too much to say about Regret 9. It's an instrumental track presumably exploring, well, regret, and transitions very smoothly throughout Home Invasion, though with some nice added moog, which always nice. I like a good bit of moog. And Adam Holzman certainly cuts the mustard with this moog solo, I'll tell you. It is an engaging musical track with some strong musical themes, and it demonstrates, I would say, overall the talent in Steven Wilson's band. In particular, I would say Guthrie Govan's roaring solo as it builds to climactic final. It's definitely one of his best. I mean, he's a fantastically talented guitarist, so it's hardly a shock. Though I would say the album has a tiny little bit of a wobble when it comes to Transience, which is the only track that's actually not played live on the current tour of the album. It's not a big wobble, but I wouldn't say it's quite the rock-solid genius consistency of the rest of the album. Stephen Wilson alone performs on this track. It's mainly acoustic guitars and a little bit of mellotron, for good measure, I suppose. Personally, I just find it an unnecessary lull in the album that lacks a lot of the spontaneity of previous songs, and I find it a little less memorable. Yes, it contains some warm, inviting melodies as the characters look fondly, well, as the character looks fondly back upon her childhood and sort of realises the transitory nature of human happiness and the frailty of stability. I just don't quite find it the best told part of the story, and the musical delivery just doesn't do too much for me on this album, which is filled with so many amazing things. But nothing, and I mean nothing, can truly prepare you for the tidal wave of exhilaration that is Ancestral. I'm calling it now. It's Song of 2015. In fact, it's one of the very best prog songs I've heard in the last 10 years, probably. It's just a monumental achievement in my eyes, and I would possibly go as far to say, I know this is a big statement, possibly the best Stephen Wilson track he's ever performed on. And I'm being totally serious. It's up there with Anesthesia from, let's say, Anesthetize from Fear of Vampire, which was my previous favourite Stephen Wilson track. Since the track is about 13 minutes long, the bulk of its genius lies within its music, and most of the track is kind of instrumental. So we'll just cover the lyrics first, which is definitely in the first portion of the song. While to a certain extent continuing some of the themes of youth that we had explored in Transience, this track seems, to me certainly, far more about the character's disconnect and disillusion with urban modern life. Lyrics such as, "When the world doesn't want you, it will never tell you why." She just simply seems to feel as if she doesn't belong. She just even, I would say, can't belong. Though I do sense a part of her wants to, when Stephen Wilson sings to a refrain of, "Come back, child, if you want to." You can see she's wishing to be normal. She desperately wants to be normal, but just can't. Mentally, she's ill-equipped for what society deems as a normal life and as a social life with others. Musically, this song is epic. Utterly epic. From the gentle knock of the electronic beat, which sets this sort of urban mood with Wilson's voice, and then as Theo Travis's flute climbs into the mix, and the song just begins to take a different turn. The electronic is still present prominently in the first few minutes, but soon strings begin to envelop the sound, the swelling consuming all. Wilson's vocals as delicate and heartfelt as ever, conveying the emotions of the character, and then soon the drums really kick in and the song begins its ascendant into the spectacular sort of 8 minutes of instrumental bliss. We're full of time signature changes, superb dynamics from light clean picking to heavy distorted metal riffs, 70s prog stylings, and just the mightiest of crescendos, which live I can tell you is an absolute treat. Powerful, energetic, very prog, and incredible, with one of my favourite sort of riffs that Stephen Wilson has just ever played, and I definitely sense some King Crimson flavour definitely to some of the strong, harder riffs that he plays here. Just listen to this, please, and make sure it's loud. We're approaching the end of this album, and Happy Returns really can be seen as the lyrical conclusion to the album. It shows the character's current position in life through a letter she's writing to her brother. Her dissatisfaction with society is clear, yet she reaches out just one last time to attempt to connect with anyone who might give a flying damn if she lives or dies. And this is sung across a musical backdrop, returning the piano theme earlier from No Regrets, and moving into an upbeat, optimistic, acoustic melody with Wilson sort of humming in the chorus, and there's clearly hope. This is more of a pop rock song and a fitting conclusion. I've heard many people say it's one of their favourites from the album, and definitely, I can understand that completely. In fact, it's one of my favourites. It's a song you can just put on by itself. It's a very nice listen. And it seems she takes some form of pill, like maybe a sleeping pill or something, and never finishes the letter. And we're sort of wondering on the fate of the character. The song certainly seems too happy for the character to die in the same way as her real-life counterpart Joyce, but maybe the last track offers a conclusion. Well, while Ascendant Here On is the musical conclusion, it's certainly an ambiguous conclusion. It's just simply an instrumental track at the end, and we can only really speculate on what happens to her. Some say that when it says she feels drowsy and happy returns, it's because she's taking her own life, but reading interviews, and especially with the tone of Happy Returns, I find it very difficult to believe that she dies at the end. But there's some who also argue there's a sci-fi aspect, which there's evidence for that. On the blog, there's pictures with bright lights, and she talks about these visitors all the time, and the video accompanying the live performance. You see at the end these sort of bright lights in the sky, and her looking up at them, perhaps aliens to take her away. It may sound silly, but with the concept, it's not out the realms of possibility. But it's definitely an ending that can be interpreted differently by different people, and I think many are valid. Stephen Wilson didn't have a set ending for this. You can really take away from this what you will. And I'll tell you how I interpret the ending. To me, she simply disappears into the city. She could not quite bring herself to send the letter and would simply prefer to live a sedated, isolated life, so far removed from social interaction that no one would ever be the wiser if she dropped down dead. She's simply nothing more than a ghost wandering the streets, neither alive nor dead to anyone or anything, just invisible. I genuinely do believe that Stephen Wilson has achieved something extraordinary with this album. It's a refreshing take on themes of isolation with a gripping story told in a musically diverse and often unexpected way. It diverts from the 70s prog rock that was The Raven and creates something new, refreshing. This album is not prog in the classic sense of Genesis, yes, King Crimson, but it really is prog, I would say, in the sense of genuinely progressing music, pushing the idea of rock music as art further, especially the multimedia aspects, the album. Of course, you have the deluxe edition, the booklets, and if you look on some videos on YouTube or Unboxer, it's so elaborate, the effort that's been put into that. The blog on the internet and the videos that accompany the live performance and things like that. Stephen Wilson should be massively commended for this. 9.5 out of 10. It is near perfection and a very strong Album of the Year candidate. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thank you very much for watching. This has been a very, very lengthy review, but I really wanted to go into depth about this album. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching. Comment, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.